Good afternoon, students. In the last class, we have completed chapter number 8, Income Determination and Multiplier. In this chapter, we will come and study chapter number 9. Fine. This is the last chapter of the unit, not the macroeconomics. Fine. So, in this chapter, as clearly see, it is written excess demand and deficient demand. So, under what circumstances it will create an excess demand, and under what circumstances there will be a deficient demand. So let's proceed. Like introduction, you have already aware about in the previous chapter. We come to aware about the equilibrium level. That equilibrium level is take place where AD is equal to AS, right? You clearly know what is AD, aggregate demand, and the formula is computed by C plus I, consumption plus investment, whereas aggregate supply is equal to national income, which is denoted by Y. According to Keynes, now we are here. According to Keynes, the equilibrium level of employment may or may not be fully employment level. It means equilibrium level may be exceed or fall of full level of employment. That means at a full level of employment in economy, there might be the chances that equilibrium level you are maybe lacking or maybe exceed. Fine. So how this will be possible? Just because of excess demand sometimes, or sometimes as an deficient demand. If equilibrium level exceed to the full level of employment, then there will be a excess demand in a economy. However, if the equilibrium level falls short of the full employment level, then it is a situation of deficient demand. Now we'll understand there are two concepts. First one is excess demand and other one is deficient demand. So first one we'll study about excess demand. Excess demand refers to the situation when aggregate demand, hence AD is more than aggregate supply corresponding to full employment level of output in the economy. जितना हमारा मैक्सिमम फुल हो सकता था, we are providing the same, but still हमारे लैकिंग कर रहे हैं. हमारी डिमांड जो है वो क्या कर रही है, एक्सीड कर रही है जितना भी हम आउटपुट प्रोड्यूस करते हैं. दैट इज एग्रीगेट सप्लाई. फाइन. सो दिस टर्म इज नोन एज एन एक्सेस डिमांड. It is the excess demand anticipated expenditure over the value of employment value. Like we have to just do it this definition. Then further we'll come up with excess demand. This point, excess demand gives rise to the inflationary gap. So as you know that when we are demanding more in the market, that means we have a more purchasing power. When we are more purchasing power, it will lead to the what? Inflationary pressure in the market. Fine. So now we'll come up and understand what is inflationary gap. Mark this word. Sometimes the board will ask what do you mean by inflationary gap for 1 marks itself. So inflationary gap refers to the gap by which actual aggregate demand, what is actual aggregate demand, exceed the aggregate demand required to establish full level of equilibrium. Now this definition we'll understand with the help of diagram. Look. Write it down. X axis, y axis. This is origin. We can take income. I told you earlier also, income, output, or maybe employment. On this axis we'll take about aggregate demand, AD. Fine. Now as we already know that AS, aggregate supply, originate 45-degree angle and shooting from origin, right? Positive slope, upward positive slope. So we know that aggregate supply creating 45-degree angle originate from origin. I told you why it is originate. We have already done in chapter number 7. And we know that aggregate demand is like this. Aggregate demand. This is what we require to at the equilibrium level. But we are here. We in our economy there is ultimately, if we at equilibrium point will be the condition is this. This is the condition this will mark as an equilibrium point. Fine. Equilibrium point in the condition where is a full level of employment in economy. full level of employment. So this is a full level of employment, like this is an equilibrium point in economy. But at today what we have, we are in excess demand. What we are studying? Excess demand. So today in our economy there is excess demand. So now excess demand means actual जो demand है aggregate, हम उससे भी आगे हैं. So mark this, do like this, aggregate demand dash aggregate 1, write it down. We know that what is the formula of aggregate demand? Normal C plus I, and this is C plus I plus delta I, and I'll tell you why it is delta I, change in investment. Fine, we'll mark. Wait, so this is what this is not the excess demand. Please mark my word, this is not that. You will not show that this is an excess demand, because the excess demand is not on here on this x-axis. If I'll mark this is an excess demand, we will write like this, and this is the gap will shown, but we have to show aggregate demand is here, so we have to show on this axis. So this is an excess demand. So how will I show this? Like this, and this gap, like this gap, I'm naming this A. So this is A. So if someone asks what is the excess demand, so you will say excess demand is clearly shown in the diagram, that from E to A is shown in the diagram, that is excess demand. सर आपने ये क्यों नहीं ली, यहाँ पे इंटरसेक्ट कर रहे हैं. अगर मैं बेटा यहाँ पे इंटरसेक्ट कर लेता तो आप देखो आप यहाँ लाई करते, है ना, यहाँ लाई करते तो वहाँ पे एम्प्लॉयमेंट एक्सेस होती, जो कि है ही नहीं. हमारी इकोनॉमी में आज एक्सेस डिमांड है. हमारी इकोनॉमी में क्या है? एक्सेस डिमांड है. ड्यू टू एक्सेस डिमांड वी हैव शोन दिस. इफ समवन आस्क्स व्हाट इज एक्सेस डिमांड, दिस इज एक्सेस डिमांड. नाउ ट्राई टू अंडरस्टैंड द डेफिनेशन ऑफ इन्फ्लेशनरी गैप विद दिस डायग्राम. राइट, इन्फ्लेशनरी गैप से हम इस डायग्राम को समझने की कोशिश करेंगे. Inflation gap refers to the gap by which actual aggregate demand exceed. Look, actual aggregate demand exceed. Go now. Listen to me and just go through the diagram. Actual aggregate demand exceed the aggregate demand required to establish full equilibrium level. So this is actual what we are going in economy, which is exceed then what is required to make a full employment equilibrium. So ये required है, but अभी हम कहाँ पे हैं? यहाँ पे. And this gap is known as excess demand. If someone asks what is excess demand, you will say in the diagram E to A is shown by excess demand, and which ultimately rise to a inflationary gap. So if someone asks what is inflationary gap refers to the gap by which actual aggregate demand exceed the aggregate demand required to establish full equilibrium level. That's it. Fine. This is what, if someone asks what is this, this is inflationary gap. This is inflationary gap. Fine. If someone from where to where, A to E is a inflationary gap. Fine. Hope this diagram is clear. Now study few more points of related to this. As shown in the diagram, it is very good, nicely is written in this book. In the diagram, income, output, employment are measured on the x-axis and aggregate demand measured on the y-axis. Aggregate demand यानी कि AD and aggregate supply AS curve intersect point E, where intersect at point E, which indicate the full equilibrium level. So this is a full in economy. But what we are doing, we are not at equilibrium. That's why it is come to the condition of excess demand. Our AD is greater than this point. So actually our VR point, which is ahead than this, we are excess than the actual demand. I mean the actual equilibrium must be there due to increase in additional investment. Now point, look, we know that in the diagram AD formula is C plus I. Fine. Why the demand is more? Just because of additional investment is there. When we made an additional investment, the people get an opportunity to work over there. Hence, they'll get employment. When they get employment, they'll have more power. They'll get salary in return. When they have a more salary, when they have more money in their pocket, ultimately there is a more purchasing power. When they have a more purchasing power, they will buy more in the market. Fine. So this is how it leads to a excess demand. Although there are so many factors or so many other reasons that we're going to discuss in this video itself. Just wait. So now to come up this point, due to increase in investment, that is delta I, aggregate demand rise to AD to AD1. It denotes the situation of excess demand, which and the gap between them, that is not EF, I have written down EA. The gap between this is EA is known as inflationary gap. That's it. Fine. What is the reason for this? Excess demand के reason क्या है? Just because of rise in the propensity to consume. The people have rising the propensity income. Like they're consuming more and saving less. When they're consuming more, so ultimately they will demand more in the market. When they demand more, it will be lead to the excess demand. Further, fine. The next point is reduction in taxes. Reduction in taxes. Ultimately, suppose a person A is earning rupees 10 lakhs in a year. Income tax he is paying 30%. Like suppose, although 25% suppose. So 25%, 10 lakh to 25% is 2 lakh 50,000. So how much amount he remain to 7 lakh 50,000 for the consumption, for his personal consumption. Fine, dispose of in the market. But what if the taxes reduces in the market and 10 lakh rupees only he have to pay now 10%, that is 1 lakh. So he left with 1 lakh 50,000 more income that he will going to consume in ultimately. So reduction in taxes will increase the purchasing power of that particular consumer. Fine. Next, increase in government expenditure. Government expenditure is increasing. That means it is going to employ more people. When it is going to employ more people, they will get salary and ultimately purchasing power will increase. Increase in investment. Ultimately, I told you increase investment earlier. Fall in imports. Now, what is the meaning of imports? Import means that we are purchasing goods and services from other country. That is, we are not dependent. We are dependent on other countries. Like that is imports. But it is going to fall. That means now we are purchasing less from foreign countries, just because it is costlier to us. So we are purchasing from where? Our domestic market. That is from our country itself. That means we are going to increase the demand of our country. Yes. So ultimately reasons for this. Rise in exports. Now what is rise in exports? Exports means we are going to sell our product beyond our boundaries, like foreign countries. That is exports, and this is going to increase just because the other country find it more cheaper products than from other world. Fine, so they are purchasing more from our country. That will lead to a rise in exports. When rise in export, that means our demand is more, ultimately lead to excess demand in the market. Deficit financing means the RBI printing more currency in our economy. When they are producing more currency in our economy, this will be lead to a more purchasing power for people in our country. Fine, ultimately more purchasing power. Impact of excess demand. Effect on output. Effect on output. We are already full. So there will be no impact on output. In fact, if there will be no impact on the employment level, because we are full. जितनी employment हम provide कर सकते economy में, we are providing the same. Right? If suppose we can hire 100 people, so we are providing a job to the 100 people itself. So there will be no change in both of them. Output will remain same, employment will remain same. But if we talk about the prices, excess demand is there. Whether the general prices in economy will increase or not? Yes, because it will be lead to a inflationary gap. It going to increase the prices in the market. Fine, this is effect. Now, other one is deficit demand. इसका उल्टा जो अभी हमने पढ़ा ना, इसका उल्टा. Fine. Now, deficit demand refers to a situation when aggregate demand is less than aggregate supply. वहाँ पे more था ना, यहाँ पे less है. What? Aggregate demand. Then actual it is required to full employment level. Fine. Corresponding to the full employment level of the output in an economy. Fine. The situation of deficit demand arises when planned aggregate expenditure falls short of aggregate supply. So our expenditure, hence our demand is fall short. Fine. Then aggregate supply at a full level of full employment level. It gives a rise to a what? Deflationary gap. It gives a rise to what? Deflationary gap. Fine. Then ahead, deflationary gap. Now please mark this point. Deflationary gap will also come up asking 1 marks question. What is deflationary gap? So deflationary gap is the gap by which actual aggregate demand falls short. Because this is deficit demand. Now demand is fall short. Demand falls short of aggregate demand required to establish full employment equilibrium. So we are short, which is required in the market. Fine, the diagram will like this. I'll explain over here itself. AS is 45-degree angle. This is equilibrium point, is this is what actual, but this is what equilibrium level, but actual is where we are lagging behind. Here it is. Fine, we will show by like this, and this gap is known as deficit demand. Is it clear? Fine. Now we'll move and discuss further. डायग्राम बेटा एक बार खुद ट्राई करना, नहीं आता तो प्लीज डू आस्क मी, बिकॉज इट इज क्वाइट सिमिलर टू द इन्फ्लेशनरी गैप. इन्फ्लेशनरी गैप में हम ऊपर पॉइंट बनाते हैं, डेफिसिट डिमांड में फॉल शॉर्ट, सो हम पीछे पॉइंट बनाएंगे. फाइन, दिस गैप यानी कि E and G इज नोन एज इन्फ्लेशनरी गैप. फाइन, द कंसेप्ट ऑफ now as seen in the diagram, income output, this is same, an x-axis and aggregate demand on the y-axis. Aggregate demand and aggregate supply curve intersect at point E. This is what? This is required at full employment equilibrium. But we are here at point E. No, we are beyond. We are deficit. Due to decrease in investment, now the people withdraw its investment. When they withdraw its investment, there will be definitely they're going to throw people from employment. That people will be more unemployed in our country. When they are more employed in our country, they don't have that purchasing power, because they won't get any salary or something like this. So when purchasing power is no purchasing power, they don't have ability to go and purchase the products available in the markets. Fine. It denotes the situation of deficit demand gap. EG is the term as बिल्कुल same. Now what is reason for this? Why it is a reason for deficit demand in an economy? चलो एक बार डायग्राम बना ही देता हूँ मैं आप लोगों के लिए. खुद भी पॉज करके खुद भी क्रिएट करो, खुद बनाइए एक बार डायग्राम, पॉज कीजिए, ठीक है. सिमिलर है बहुत. This first X, write it down, this Y 0, यहाँ पे लिख लीजिए आप इनकम, आउटपुट एंड फाइनली एम्प्लॉयमेंट. यहाँ पे लिख लीजिए आप AS. मार्क दिस एज एन aggregate supply which is known as AS, aggregate supply, informing 45-degree angle, originate from origin, right? This is, mark this as AD, C plus I. This is aggregate demand. This is what required for full employment equilibrium. But we are here. No, we are ahead. We are making diagram of deficit demand. So this is what required, but we are here. This is what actually economy. No, we are lacking. So the diagram will fall short. This aggregate demand will be fall short like this. So AD1, which is known as C plus I. आज के आप क्या कर रहे हो, विड्रॉ कर रहे हो ना, तो माइनस कर दीजिए डेल्टा I, माइनस कर देना डेल्टा I. विड्रॉ कर रहे हैं आज हम, ठीक है. विड्रॉ कर रहे हो तो आपकी डिमांड क्या होगी, कम हो गई है. We don't mark this point. This point and this was the equilibrium. Mark this is an A, and this is known as what? This is known as deflationary gap, and this is what known as full employment, right? This will be known as full employment. This gap is known as deflationary gap. Is it clear to everyone? This is how we need to show. So point deflationary gap क्या हुआ, the point is E and A shows deflationary gap. This is how we need to draw diagram of deflationary or deficit demand. Fine. Now what are the reasons? Why do you feel that reason is this? Why the decrease in propensity of consumer क्या कर रहे हैं, आज उनकी जो कंजप्शन है वो क्या हो गई, डिक्लाइन हो गई है. When the consumption is declining in the market, definitely they will not demand. That means they are demanding more. What are the goods and services available in the market? Fine. So decrease in propensity to consume, increase in taxes. Like earlier that person, I give an example, he's having rupees, what? Earlier he's earning 10 lakh rupees. So like take an example. A person, Mr. A, earning 10 lakh rupees. Now two condition. Earlier there was only 10% taxes. So he is paying only 1 lakh to government, compulsory payment, and 9 lakh remain for his disposition. तो डिस्पर्स वो कर सकते हैं, डिस्पोजिशन कर सकते हैं, डिस्पोज ऑफ कर सकते हैं इनकम को, मतलब कि पर्टिकुलरली अपने लिए कंज्यूम कर सकते हैं. नाउ व्हाट इज इफ वी आर इंक्रीजिंग द टैक्सेस टू 30%. Fine, 30%. So now what is legal payment he made to compulsory payment, compulsory transfer payment? 3 lakh. Now he left with 7 lakh. So when it decreasing is what? Income. So definitely he will purchase less in the market. When he is going to purchase less in the market, ultimately will lead to a deficient demand in the market. Fine. So increase in taxes, decrease in government expenditure. Now government expenditure decreases in the market. Government will definitely not employ more people. When it is not employ more people, there will be no salary earned by those people who were earlier earning. So with this, ultimately decreasing purchasing power, decreasing purchase power will lead to less purchase of goods and services in the market. Further fall in investment, already it is a withdrawal. As we have seen, it is a withdraw of investment. Whenever there is a withdrawal of investment, ultimately the people will not get an employment opportunity as compared to earlier. Fine. Rise in import. That means we are highly dependent upon the foreign countries for the purchase, because the foreign product is cheaper to us. So we'll go and purchase right in the foreign market. So we are purchasing from other country, not from our country. So demand हमारे particular country की demand की क्या हो गई? Less हो गई. So definitely क्या हो गया वो? Deficient demand. Fall in export. Just because of our product are costlier to the rest of the world. So now they will come and purchase from our country. भाई हमारा जो प्रोडक्ट है वो दूसरी कंट्री वालों को बड़ा महंगा पड़ रहा है आज. क्या वो हमारी कंट्री में आएंगे क्या खरीदने? डेफिनेटली नॉट. वो खरीदेंगे नहीं. तो जब वो खरीदेंगे नहीं, हम एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे नहीं. जब हम एक्सपोर्ट करेंगे नहीं तो फॉल इन एक्सपोर्ट हो जाएगा, और अल्टीमेटली दिस इज अ साइन ऑफ व्हाट? डेफिशिएंट डिमांड. इज इट क्लियर? नाउ व्हाट इज इम्पैक्ट? Effect on output. There will be increase due to lack in sufficient aggregate demand. There will be an increase in inventory stock. As we know that we have produced, ultimately हमारा full level employment यहाँ पे था. So we are what? Demand कम है, supply तो आज भी आपकी इतनी बची हुई है, तो inventory we are lying with the inventories हम पे हैं. So due to lack of sufficient aggregate demand, there will be increase in inventory stock. It will be force the firm to plan to lesser production for the subsequent period. As a result, planned output will fall. क्योंकि अब हम प्रोडक्शन करेंगे ही नहीं, बिकॉज हम पे सप्लाई ऑलरेडी है, डिमांड लोग कर नहीं रहे हैं, तो क्या करोगे बना के? इफेक्ट ऑन एम्प्लॉयमेंट. डेफिसिट डिमांड कॉज involuntary unemployment in the economy due to fall in planned output. What is involuntary? The people want to work, but they won't get a work. Why they won't get a work? Because already the inventory is lie in the market. Now what is the use that will be produced more? Fine. Effect of the general prices. The general prices ultimately fall just because we have ample of goods available in the market. Fine. As you already know, demand is क्या हो रही है? कम हो रही है. Like you have like making diagram like this. Please go through this over here. You have drawn demand like this in class 11th. You have supply like this. This is the interaction. This is the equilibrium point. Now demand is getting what? Less. The equilibrium point is here because supply is intersect new demand over this point. So mark this. So what? Earlier price is this, now price is this. What? Reduction in prices. So whenever there is deficient demand, it will lead to the reduction in prices. Fine. Go through this. This is your homework. Go through this. So we are done this in this video, and the rest of the chapter we will study in the next video. If you found any kind of difficulty, then please do ask me. Fine. Take care, beta.